My daughter looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Mom, I'm marrying Mr. Lewis." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. The room spun. The same man who used to drive her home from debate club, who used to smile politely at parent-teacher conferences, now sat across from me at my kitchen table holding my daughter's hand. I never thought I'd have to share this story with the world, but now there's no other choice. Before we begin, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to support more emotional family stories like mine. And don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your reflections and experiences, because sometimes sharing is the first step toward healing. He looked calm, almost rehearsed. His brown eyes, once friendly and professional, now carried something I couldn't name. My daughter Emma was glowing, her 2-3-year-old face flushed with excitement. I wanted to be happy for her, I really did, but something about that moment felt wrong, deeply wrong. I tried to keep my composure. "You're marrying your teacher?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "He's not my teacher anymore, Mom," she said quickly, her tone defensive. "We're adults. We love each other." Adults. Love. Words that felt like foreign languages coming from her mouth. Mr. Lewis Daniel, as he asked me to call him, reached for my hand, as if we were old friends sharing good news. "I know this might come as a shock," he said, his voice smooth, practiced. "But I care deeply for Emma. We've waited until she finished college. We wanted to do things the right way. The right way." That phrase burned in my chest. Because no matter how carefully he spoke, I couldn't erase the memory of my teenage daughter coming home from school years ago, talking about how much she admired Mr. Lewis. He was the young, passionate English teacher who understood her. I thought it was just a harmless crush. Every girl had one at that age, right? But now, sitting there watching their fingers intertwine, I wondered if the crush had never ended, or worse, if it had been encouraged. I forced a smile that felt like glass cutting my lips. "When's the wedding?" I asked, my voice breaking halfway through. "In 2 months," Emma said, smiling nervously. "It's going to be small, just family and a few close friends." I nodded, even though every instinct in me screamed no. After they left, I sat in silence for hours. My husband, Michael, came home from work and found me still at the table, staring at the untouched cup of tea. When I told him, he laughed at first, then the color drained from his face. "That's sick," he muttered. He was her teacher. That's not right. But Emma was an adult now. Legally, there was nothing we could do. The following weeks were a blur of half-hearted congratulations and sleepless nights. I wanted to talk to Emma, but she avoided me. Every time I tried, she'd say I was judging her. She was in love, and nothing else mattered. The wedding day came faster than I expected. It was held in a small chapel outside of town. I remember sitting in the pew, my hands cold and trembling. When Emma walked down the aisle in her lace gown, she looked radiant, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a lie. Daniel stood at the altar, smiling, confident. When their eyes met, he looked at her not like a man in love, but like a man who'd finally claimed something he'd been waiting for. After the ceremony, people clapped and laughed, and I tried to join in. I hugged my daughter, told her she was beautiful. She looked at me with that hopeful smile and said, "I'm happy, Mom, really happy." But I could see a flicker of something in her eyes. Fear? Doubt? I wasn't sure. Months passed. At first, Emma called often. She talked about their new apartment, their weekend trips, the way Daniel made her feel safe. But slowly, the calls became less frequent. Her voice grew distant. When I asked how she was doing, she changed the subject. One evening, she called out of the blue. Her voice was trembling. "Mom, can you come over?" When I arrived, I noticed the bruises before she could hide them. Small, fading marks along her arm. Her eyes were puffy, her smile forced. "What happened?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. "It's nothing," she said quickly. "I fell. I didn't believe her." That night, as we sat on her couch, she finally whispered, "Sometimes he gets angry. Not at me, just life." I wanted to take her home with me right then, but she begged me not to make things worse. "He's under a lot of pressure, Mom. He loves me, I swear he does." I left her apartment with my heart in pieces. I tried to talk to Michael, but he said we had to let her make her own choices. "If we push too hard," he said, "she'll shut us out completely." But the mother in me couldn't stay silent. I started digging quietly. I asked around at the school where Daniel used to teach. Most people were cautious, unwilling to say much. But one woman, a former colleague, pulled me aside after I visited. "There were rumors," she said softly. "He got too close to a few students." Nothing was ever proven, but there were complaints. The administration hushed it up. My blood ran cold. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Emma's teenage years in my mind. The sudden confidence, the secret smiles, the late-night texts she used to hide. Had it started back then? I remembered once, when she was 16, she came home crying after school. She said she messed up and didn't want to talk about it. I thought it was a fight with a friend. Now, I wasn't so sure. Days later, I went back to Emma's apartment unannounced. She wasn't home, but Daniel was. He opened the door, shirt unbuttoned, eyes cold. "Mrs. Hart," he said, leaning against the frame, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" I swallowed my fear. "I came to see my daughter. She's busy," he said curtly. I tried to step inside, but he blocked me. Then he smiled, that same polite smile I remembered from parent-teacher conferences. "You should let her live her own life. She's not a child anymore." His tone made my skin crawl. As I turned to leave, he said quietly, "It's hard for you, isn't it? Losing control." I froze. He knew exactly how to twist the knife. That night, Emma called again, this time sobbing. "Mom, I don't know what to do," she whispered. "He's not who I thought he was." And that was the night everything began to unravel. When I reached her apartment that night, the door was unlocked. The lights were dim, and I could hear muffled sobs from the living room. Emma was sitting on the floor, her knees drawn to her chest. Mascara streaked across her face. There was a half-empty glass of wine beside her, and her phone kept buzzing with messages all from Daniel. "Emma," I said softly, kneeling beside her, "tell me what happened." She shook her head, her whole body trembling. He gets so angry, Mom. I don't even know why. Sometimes it's because dinner's late, or because I don't answer fast enough when he calls. It's like he's two different people. One moment he's kind, and the next." Her voice broke, and I could feel her fear. "Where is he now?" I asked. "At school," she whispered. "They let him start teaching again." That hit me like a slap. He was back teaching, around young girls. I wanted to call the police, but I knew she wouldn't. Let me. She still loved him, or thought she did. Love has a cruel way of binding people to their pain. I stayed with her that night. She fell asleep on the couch, and I sat in the dark, staring at the shadows on the wall. Every sound from the hallway made my heart race. I kept thinking, what if he came back? When morning came, I convinced her to stay with me and Michael for a while. She agreed, reluctantly, but said she had to go back the next day to get her things. That next evening, she went alone. She promised she'd be careful. Hours passed, midnight came and went. She didn't answer her phone. I called again and again until finally, a text arrived. "I'm fine, don't worry, we talked things out." But something about the message felt off, too formal, too calm. It didn't sound like her. The next morning, I drove to her apartment myself. When I arrived, the curtains were drawn tight. No sound inside. I knocked once, twice, then harder. Finally, the door Opened Daniel stood there, smiling faintly, as if he had been expecting me. "She's sleeping," he said. "I want to see her." "She's fine, Mrs. Hart. You worry too much." His voice was low, almost soothing, but there was something dark beneath it. I tried to push past him, but he stepped forward, blocking the doorway. "Go home," he whispered. "You're not helping her by showing up here." The door closed slowly in my face. That night, I barely slept. Every instinct in me screamed that something was terribly wrong. The next morning, I went to the police. I told them about the bruises, about the fear in her voice, about how he wouldn't let me see her. But without clear evidence, they said there was little they could do. "She's an adult," the officer said gently, "unless she files a report herself." I walked out of that station feeling like the world had turned its back on me. For 2 weeks, I didn't hear from Emma. Every day I called, every day I texted. Nothing. I thought about driving back, breaking down the door, but Michael begged me to wait. "We'll make it worse," he said. Then, one night, around 11 p.m., the phone rang. It was Emma. Her voice was shaking. "Mom, can you come get me?" I didn't even grab a coat. I drove through the rain, heart pounding, until I saw her standing under a streetlight with a single suitcase. Her face was pale, her lips swollen, her eyes red from crying. She didn't say much that night. She just sat in the car, silent, staring out the window. When we got home, she went straight to bed. The next morning, she finally spoke. "He told me if I ever left him, he'd ruin me," she whispered. "He said he has things, messages, photos from when I was younger. He said if anyone found out, he'd go to prison. So he blamed me, said I wanted it. I felt the ground vanish beneath me. My worst fear confirmed. It had started when she was in high school. She was only 16. The next few days were a blur of tears, anger, and desperate attempts to convince her to go to the police. She refused at first. "Everyone will think I'm disgusting," she said. "No one will believe me." But I couldn't let it go. Quietly, I started collecting what I could: old phones, emails, photos, messages. I went to her old high school, asked about him. Most people didn't want to talk, but one young teacher, new at the time, remembered seeing Daniel and Emma in his classroom after hours. "They always said they were working on essays," she told me, "but it didn't feel right." I found old photos on Emma's laptop, pictures of her school projects, class events, and one of her and Daniel standing too close, his hand lightly on her shoulder. At the time, no one thought much of it, but now, knowing what I knew, it made my stomach twist. When I showed the photos to Emma, she broke down. "He said he loved me," she sobbed. "He said he'd wait until I was ready. He had groomed her, manipulated her for years until she believed his love was real. I couldn't stand it any longer. I went to the police again, this time with everything I had. They opened an investigation quietly. It wasn't easy. There were years between what happened and now. But the evidence, the messages, the timeline, it was enough to raise serious questions. When they called Daniel in for questioning, he played innocent, of course. "It was all legal," he said. "She was an adult when we started dating." But he didn't know what we had, the proof that it had started earlier. Emma had to give her statement. Watching her sit in that room, trembling, trying to tell strangers what had been done to her, it broke something inside me. The investigation went on for months. Rumors started spreading at the school. He was suspended, then quietly let go. His reputation shattered, but none of that brought Emma peace. She started seeing a therapist, trying to piece herself back together. Some days, she was strong. Other days, she couldn't get out of bed. And then, one afternoon, as we sat on the porch drinking tea, she said something that chilled me. "Mom," she whispered, "there's something else you don't know." I looked at her, afraid to ask. She took a deep breath, eyes glistening. "When I was 17, there was a baby. I felt the air leave my lungs." "A baby?" For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. My mind refused to process the words. Emma stared down at her hands, her fingers twisting together like she was trying to hide inside herself. "I didn't tell anyone," she whispered. "Not even Dad." I reached across the table, taking her trembling hands in mine. "Emma," I said softly, "what do you mean? What happened to the baby?" Her lips quivered. "He made me get rid of it." The world tilted. My throat went dry. I wanted to scream, to cry, to break something, anything, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, listening as my daughter told me the most unbearable truth of her life. She said she had found out she was pregnant in her final year of high school. Daniel had told her to keep quiet, that if anyone found out, he'd lose everything. "He said we'd be together soon," she murmured, her eyes distant, "but only if I got rid of it first." So she did, alone. He took her to a clinic in another town. He paid in cash. Afterwards, he dropped her off a few blocks from home and told her to act normal. She came home pale, quiet, said she had the flu. I remembered that week vividly. She barely ate, slept all day, and cried in her room. I had no idea why. Now I did. "Emma," I breathed, tears blurring my vision. "You were a child. You should never have had to go through that." She nodded, silent tears running down her cheeks. "He told me it was our secret. That real love meant protecting each other. I thought I was helping him. I thought I was saving us." I reached out and pulled her into my arms, holding her as she sobbed against my shoulder. All I could think was how much pain had been buried inside her for so long. After that day, something in me changed. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I became her defender, her protector, her witness. I promised her that man would never hurt another girl again. The investigation grew stronger when we brought this new information to light. The police located records from the clinic. There were inconsistencies in his employment timeline that aligned with the dates Emma gave them. Piece by piece, the truth surfaced. But Daniel wasn't going down quietly. He hired a lawyer. He accused Emma of lying to destroy his life after their marriage failed. The media caught wind of it, articles, headlines, gossip blogs twisting the story. Some called Emma a victim, others called her manipulative. The court of public opinion tore her apart. I watched my daughter crumble under the weight of it all. Every time her name appeared online, it was like a knife to the chest. I wanted to scream at the world, "You don't know her. You don't know what he did." When the case went to court, I sat behind her every single day. Daniel sat just a few feet away, in his suit and tie, calm as ever. He barely looked at her. When he did, it was with that same cold confidence that used to charm parents at school events. Emma testified bravely. Her voice shook, but her words were steady. She told them everything: the grooming, the manipulation, the years of silence. At one point, she looked straight at him and said, "You took my childhood and called it love." The courtroom went silent. Even the judge seemed to hold his breath. When Daniel took the stand, his lies were meticulous. He claimed they hadn't spoken outside of school until she was 19. He said she pursued him, that he tried to resist. I wanted to leap across the room and tear the mask off his face, but all I could do was sit there, gripping the edge of the bench, my knuckles white. The trial dragged on for weeks. Witnesses came and went. Old colleagues spoke in vague terms, too afraid to say too much. But then, one teacher, the same woman who had warned me months before, brought forward an old email chain. In it, Daniel had discussed special mentorship sessions for Emma after school. The timestamps matched the year she was 16. That changed everything. The prosecutor used it to establish a pattern, to prove he had access and opportunity long before Emma was an adult. Slowly, the picture became clear. This wasn't a tragic romance. It was a calculated crime. When the verdict finally came, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold Emma's. Guilty. Daniel Lewis was found guilty of multiple charges related to misconduct and abuse of authority. The judge's voice was steady, cold. He was sentenced to several years in prison. Emma didn't cry. She just sat there, staring straight ahead. When they took him away in handcuffs, he turned to her and smiled. That smile still haunts me. After the trial, Emma stopped speaking for a while. The relief of justice didn't heal the wound. How could it? The man who had stolen her youth, who had manipulated her into silence, was finally gone. But the damage lingered. There were nights when I'd wake up to the sound of her crying softly in her room. I'd go in, sit beside her, and she'd whisper, "It's like he's still here," in my head. Healing wasn't linear. Some days, she'd laugh again, go for walks, talk about the future. Other days, she'd stare at the window for hours, lost in thought. I found her sketchbook one afternoon, pages filled with drawings of faceless figures, broken clocks, wilted flowers. The pain she couldn't say out loud lived there, on paper. As months passed, she began therapy more seriously. She met survivors who had stories just like hers, women who had been silenced by men in power. Slowly, she found her voice again. One evening, she told me she wanted to go back to school, not to study literature this time, but psychology. "I want to help girls like me," she said. "I want them to know they're not crazy." I felt something inside me loosen, a small flicker of hope. For the first time in years, I saw light in her eyes. But even as she began to rebuild, there was one more thing she needed closure. And that meant confronting a truth she had buried even deeper than the rest. She came to me one night holding a small envelope. "Mom," she said quietly, "there's something I kept, something I shouldn't have." Inside were photographs, letters, a piece of him that had survived all these years hidden in the back of a drawer, untouched but not forgotten. She took a deep breath. "I think it's time I destroy it." I watched her hold the envelope like it was a live thing, something dangerous, something that had the power to wound her all over again. The photographs were of her younger self, moments from a life that should have been private, innocent, stolen by someone who had no right to touch it. Letters from him, carefully written, full of veiled threats and manipulative words, meant to twist her perception of love and loyalty. My hands itched to take them from her, to shield her from it completely. But I knew this was hers to do. She sat on the floor, tears streaming down her cheeks, trembling with a strength I had never seen before. "I can't let him control me anymore," she whispered. "Even in absence, he's still trying. He wants me to live in fear, in shame." I sat beside her and took her hand. "You've already survived everything he did to you. You are stronger than he ever imagined." She nodded, pulling herself together. The act of tearing each photograph, shredding each letter, became almost ceremonial. Each cut, each tear was a small victory, a reclaiming of herself piece by piece. It was painstaking and exhausting, but when the last shred of paper fell to the floor, she exhaled like someone had taken a weight off her chest that she had carried far too long. That night, for the first time in years, she slept peacefully, and I slept too, knowing that a chapter of terror had finally ended, even if the scars remained. In the weeks that followed, Emma began to rebuild her life in ways I had only dreamed of seeing. She moved into a small apartment near the city, furnished simply, yet it became her sanctuary. She painted the walls soft pastels, hung pictures she loved, and for the first time, allowed herself to decorate the space without fear or guilt. She reconnected with old friends, carefully, cautiously, learning to trust again. She started volunteering at a women's shelter, working with girls and young women who had faced abuse. She didn't talk much about her own experiences at first. Instead, she listened, guided, and offered her presence. I watched her, heart swelling, as she began turning her pain into purpose. One evening, she came to me with a small notebook, worn and soft from use. "I've started writing again," she said. Her voice was quiet but confident. Stories, memories, my truth. I took the notebook gently, flipping through the pages. There were sketches of faces, fragments of conversations, and passages filled with raw emotion, the kind you can't invent, the kind you only write when your soul is spilling onto paper. "You're incredible," I whispered, tears threatening again. All of this, it's brave." She smiled, a small, tired smile, but there was light in it. "I have to be brave," she said. "For me, for every girl who's been told her voice doesn't matter, for every story that's been silenced." And in that moment, I realized that our family, fractured, broken, scarred, was slowly finding a new form of life. Not perfect, not as we imagined, but alive. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived for her. I saw the return address and immediately recognized it. The prison. My heart tightened, but I handed it to her without comment. She opened it slowly, her hands steady. I watched her eyes scan the page, her lips moving slightly as she read each line. Finally, she looked up at me, a mixture of anger, disgust, and triumph in her gaze. "He wants a meeting," she said quietly. "He wants to explain." I felt bile rise in my throat. "Why would you even consider that?" "I don't want to," she admitted. "But I need to face him. Not for him, for me. To take away his power once and for all. If I leave this part of my past untouched, it will always follow me." We drove to the prison together. The journey was quiet, the rain tapping softly against the windshield. I could feel her tension, her fear, but also her resolve. She wasn't the frightened girl who once hid in her room. She was a young woman reclaiming her life. Inside the visitation room, he waited. Daniel Lewis, calm, composed, with that same disturbing smile. When he saw her, his expression flickered, surprise, irritation, maybe fear. Emma stood, facing him with the strength I had not known she possessed. "You manipulated me for years," she said, her voice clear and steady. "You stole my childhood. You lied to everyone, and now I'm telling you, you no longer have any control over me." He tried to speak, but she held up a hand. "No, you won't talk. I'm leaving here the same person I came in, stronger, not weaker. And you will not touch another girl, ever again." When she turned to leave, I saw a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. For once, he had lost. Driving home, she was quiet, but the tension had lifted from her shoulders. "I feel lighter," she admitted, "like a shadow has been lifted." Over the following months, life slowly returned to a semblance of normal. Emma threw herself into her work, her writing, and her new social life. She still had nights when the nightmares came, but she no longer faced them alone. We sat together, talked through memories, and slowly rebuilt trust between us and in the world. I often think about those months, the fear, the sleepless nights, the moments I thought I might lose her forever. And yet, I also remember the bravery she showed, the courage to speak, the will to survive. One evening, as we sat together on the porch sipping tea, she looked out at the sunset and smiled faintly. "Mom," she said softly, "I'm beginning to feel like myself again, like Emma is finally back." I reached for her hand and squeezed it. "You are back, Emma, and stronger than ever. No one can take that from you." In the weeks that followed, she even started dating again cautiously, carefully, but with hope in her eyes. Not for revenge, not for validation, but for the possibility of genuine love. And for the first time in years, I could see her looking forward, not backward. It wasn't an easy journey. Healing never is. But through every tear, every tremor of fear, every dark night, we discovered something that no betrayal could ever take away: the bond between a mother and her child, and the strength within that child to reclaim her life. And as I watched her laugh again, I understood something profound. We could never erase the past, but we could survive it, and from survival, we could grow, stronger, unbroken. Months passed, and the quiet after the storm felt strange at first. The house, once filled with tense silence and fear, began to breathe again. Emma and I would sit together in the mornings, sipping tea on the porch, talking about little things, a book she loved, a coworker she liked, even the way the sunlight hit the garden. Those conversations, simple and mundane, were miracles after everything we had endured. One evening, Emma brought home a stack of letters from young women who had read her stories online. They were raw, unpolished, desperate in their honesty, each one a testament to the silent suffering of girls who had nowhere to turn. She read them aloud to me, and I could hear the tremor in her voice, the empathy she carried for these strangers, as if their pain was her own. "Mom," she said softly, "they write to me because they feel safe, because they think maybe, just maybe, someone understands." I felt tears sting my eyes. My daughter, the same. Girl who once cowered in her room, now gave courage to others. Her pain had been the seed for something beautiful, something unbreakable. Yet even with this light, shadows lingered. There were nights she wouldn't sleep, waking up suddenly, drenched in sweat, whispering fragments of memories. Daniel's shadow was still there, lingering, refusing to vanish entirely. I would sit beside her bed, stroking her hair, whispering, "He cannot touch you anymore. He is gone. You are safe now." Emma started therapy in earnest. Sessions lasted hours, and she spoke of things I hadn't even imagined, of the manipulation, the fear, the guilt she had carried for years. And through every tearful revelation, I watched her strength grow. She confronted the pain she had buried so deeply, learning to separate herself from it, to say, "This was done to me, but I am not defined by it." One afternoon, she called me in a flurry of excitement. "Mom, I think I'm ready," she said, her voice lighter than it had been in years. Ready to move on, to live. I followed her to a small cafe downtown. There, waiting at a corner table, was a man she had met through her volunteer work, kind, gentle, with a smile that didn't carry any shadows. They talked quietly, sharing laughter, small jokes, and stories of ordinary life. I sat back, watching, heart swelling. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was stepping into life fully. Fear slowly replaced by hope. But just as the horizon began to brighten, the past came knocking again. A letter arrived in my mailbox, postmarked from Daniel's lawyer. He was appealing his sentence, claiming procedural errors. My stomach dropped. Even in prison, he tried to manipulate, to twist reality, to claw at control he had already lost. Emma and I read the letter together. "Mom," she said, her voice steady, "I'm not scared of him anymore. Not for me, not for anyone. We fight this together if we have to, but it won't break me." Her words filled me with pride, but also with a bitter taste of anger. He had taken so much from her, years of innocence, her sense of safety, her trust, and yet she was still the one who rose from the ashes, stronger than ever. The appeal dragged on for months. Every time I saw Emma flinch at the mention of it, my chest tightened. But she refused to let it control her. She threw herself into her writing, her work at the shelter, and even started teaching self-defense classes for young women. She wasn't just reclaiming herself. She was helping others reclaim their power. One day, I found a notebook on her desk filled with reflections, poems, fragments of stories she had written over the past year. One entry caught my eye. "I am not broken. I am not defined by what was done to me. I am more than the pain, more than the fear. I am Emma, and I will not hide anymore." I sat there, reading and rereading the words, tears streaming down my face. Those words weren't just writing, they were a declaration, a life reclaimed. And then came the day the appeal was finally heard. We sat in the courtroom again, months after the first trial. Daniel sat with his new lawyer, his face unchanged, still attempting the mask of composure. But when the judge reviewed the evidence, the inconsistencies, and Emma's unwavering testimony, the decision was swift. His appeal denied. The sentence held. Justice, once delayed, was affirmed. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt the sun on my face as though it had been waiting for us all along. Emma walked beside me, head high, a small, victorious smile on her lips. She wasn't triumphant over him. She was triumphant over the years of fear and pain he had imposed on her. That night, we celebrated quietly at home. We cooked dinner together, shared a bottle of wine, and laughed over memories, both light and heavy. She even spoke about her plans for the future, writing a book about her experience, helping more young women navigate trauma, and building a life that wasn't dictated by fear. Through it all, I learned something profound. Survival isn't just about enduring. It's about reclaiming yourself, piece by piece, and refusing to let the darkness define you. Emma had done that, and in the process, she had taught me the same lesson. We began traveling again, taking small trips to the countryside, to places where the air was clean and the horizon open. Emma would sketch and write, sometimes sharing glimpses of her work with me. She laughed freely, sometimes late into the night, her joy uncontained, a sound that healed the deepest scars in my heart. And yet, despite the victories, there were moments of reflection, the quiet evenings when the house was still, when I thought about how close we had come to losing her. I realized that love alone hadn't saved her vigilance, courage, persistence, and the refusal to let fear win had. One evening, Emma came to me holding a small package. "Mom," she said, her voice soft, "this is for you." Inside was a locket, engraved with her initials and mine. "To remind us," she said, "that no matter what happens, we are never alone. We have each other." I held it to my chest, overwhelmed. Through betrayal, through fear, through years of silent suffering, we had found our way back to each other, stronger, wiser, unbroken. The past would never fully vanish. Scars remained to remind us, to warn us. But now, those scars carried a story of survival, of resilience, and of love that refuses to yield. Emma's voice, once trembling with fear, now carried a melody of strength and hope. And I, her mother, could finally breathe again, knowing that the girl I had raised, the woman she had become, could face the world unafraid. The months that followed were quieter, but in a good way, the kind of quiet that felt earned. Emma moved fully into her new life, renting a small apartment downtown that overlooked a park where children played after school. She filled it with books, sketches, and plants she could nurture. Watching her tend to those small things, I realized it was a metaphor for her own recovery, patient, deliberate, nurturing herself back to life. She became fiercely protective of her own space, her own boundaries. Friends, colleagues, even extended family noticed the change. She was still warm and loving, but her laughter no longer carried the tremor of fear. There was power in her calm, a serenity built from surviving storms no one else could see. Then came the first real test of her strength. One evening, a package arrived at her apartment. No return address. She opened it slowly, eyes scanning the contents. Photographs, letters, and even audio recordings, all from Daniel. His handwriting, his voice, even his threats, carried across the years. My heart raced as I watched her carefully set them aside, not screaming, not panicking. "This is exactly what he wanted," she said softly. "He wants me scared. He wants me to doubt myself, but I'm not going to let him." I marveled at her resolve. The girl who had once cowered in corners now confronted terror with calm clarity. "Mom," she said, "I'm going to the authorities again. This time, we make sure everything is documented, permanently. No more shadows." We went together, gathering the materials, filing reports. Her courage inspired me. She wasn't just protecting herself anymore. She was actively ensuring that he could never manipulate another girl the way he manipulated her. At the same time, Emma's work at the women's shelter intensified. She started mentoring young women, some barely older than she had been when Daniel's manipulation began. She listened to their stories, validated their fears, and, without revealing her own trauma, gave guidance rooted in real understanding. Every thank you note she received, every young woman who said, "I feel like I have a voice now," reinforced her path toward healing. She began teaching self-defense classes on weekends, small groups at first, but growing steadily. Watching her, I saw the transformation from victim to protector, from frightened girl to strong woman. There was a quiet joy in her eyes, a satisfaction born not of revenge, but of empowerment. But despite these victories, the nightmares persisted. Some nights, she would wake screaming, disoriented, shaking. I would hold her, whispering, "He cannot reach you here. You are safe." Slowly, slowly, those moments became fewer, her sleep longer, her dreams gentler. One afternoon, I walked into her apartment to find her writing at her desk, papers scattered around her, a pen moving furiously across the page. She looked up, eyes shining. "Mom, I'm writing my story," she said. "Not just the journal entries, not just the letters, a real book. To help other girls, to make them understand they are not alone." I hugged her tightly, overwhelmed. Every tear, every heartbreak, every sleepless night had led to this, a survivor using her pain to light a path for others. Then, unexpectedly, an opportunity came. A publisher reached out, expressing interest in her story. They didn't want just a memoir, they wanted a guide for young women, a blend of narrative and advice, drawing from real-life experiences. Emma was hesitant at first. Sharing her story with the world again felt terrifying, but she also recognized the power of her voice, the chance to prevent even one girl from being trapped the way she had been. The first draft of her book took months. She poured every ounce of emotion, fear, triumph, and reflection into it. There were nights she cried over the pages, nights she laughed at memories, once painful but now distant. She was reclaiming her narrative, chapter by chapter, sentence by sentence. When the book was finally published, the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from girls, mothers, teachers, and counselors, all thanking her for bravery, for honesty, for shining a light where darkness once lived. Emma read each message, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, always amazed at the ripple effect of her story. Even our small family circle began to heal. Michael, my husband, grew closer to Emma, understanding in a way he hadn't before. He listened without judgment, offered support without expectation, and sometimes simply sat beside her in silence, allowing the bond between father and daughter to mend. Our evenings together became peaceful rituals, tea on the porch, reading aloud to each other, planning small trips, and laughing over memories of our old home, the one where heartbreak had once taken residence. Those walls had witnessed our suffering, but now they saw. Healing too. Emma even began tentative conversations about dating again. I noticed her smiles linger longer. Her voice held warmth when she spoke about new people. Her laughter returned with a spark of hope. She approached relationships differently, now cautious, aware, but also open to genuine connection. One night, as we sat together under the stars, she looked at me, her eyes glistening with quiet certainty. "Mom," she said, "I used to be afraid to live, afraid to speak, afraid to trust. Now, I'm ready. Ready to live fully. No fear, no shadows." I held her hand tightly, feeling a wave of gratitude and pride that words could never capture. My daughter, the same girl who had been stolen from by someone she trusted, was standing tall, fearless, reclaiming every piece of herself. We began planning a mother-daughter trip, a small journey to the mountains, away from the city, away from memories that lingered. For the first time, it wasn't about escaping. It was about embracing life. Packing her bag, she turned to me with a smile. "Mom, I think I'm finally free," she said. And in that moment, I understood freedom wasn't just the absence of fear. It was the presence of strength, the reclaiming of oneself, the ability to stand in sunlight without looking over your shoulder. Emma had done it. And in her triumph, I found a kind of peace I had thought impossible. Her journey had been long, agonizing, and filled with shadows, but it also revealed the depth of resilience, the power of love, and the courage of a young woman refusing to be silenced. I knew that while the scars of the past would never fully fade, they would no longer dictate her life. She had taken back her story, her body, her mind, and her heart. And in doing so, she had also restored something precious to me, hope. The mountain air was crisp as Emma and I arrived at the small cabin we had rented for the weekend. The scent of pine and damp earth filled my lungs, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The cabin was modest, but to us, it felt like a palace, a space untouched by shadows, a place where healing could stretch its wings. Emma unpacked quietly, placing her sketches, books, and notebooks in neat stacks. She moved with purpose now, confidence in every step, a stark contrast to the frightened girl I remembered. I watched her, heart swelling, as she opened the windows and let the mountain breeze flow freely through the cabin. That evening, we sat by the fireplace with mugs of tea. The flames flickered, casting soft shadows on the walls, and for the first time, we spoke of the past without pain dominating the conversation. We laughed softly at memories from her childhood, the small, silly moments that had somehow survived the trauma. "I can't believe how far we've come," she said quietly, gazing into the fire. "Sometimes I feel like a completely different person from who I was back then, and yet I carry her with me, the scared girl. She reminds me what I survived." I reached out and held her hand. "You've survived more than anyone should have to. But you didn't just survive, you reclaimed your life. Every choice you've made since, every step forward, it's proof of your strength." She smiled faintly, and for a long time, we sat in silence, letting the warmth of the fire fill the space between us. The mountains outside stood tall, unyielding, and I realized how fitting that was. Like the mountains, Emma had become unshakable, grounded in herself. The next day, we went hiking. Emma led the way, her steps steady, her posture open and free. At the summit, we paused to catch our breath and take in the view. The valley below stretched endlessly, bathed in golden sunlight. For a moment, it felt like the world had reset, as if the pain of the past could no longer reach us here. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice carrying over the wind, "about everything that happened. About him, about the years lost, about the fear. I can't change the past, but I can change what it means to me. I can take my story, my pain, and turn it into something that helps others." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "That's the Emma I know, the one who finds light in darkness, who refuses to be broken." She hugged me tightly, her arms strong and steady. "I want you to know, Mom, that all of this, the trials, the fear, even the pain, it hasn't defeated me, and it hasn't defeated us. You've been my anchor through it all. I couldn't have survived without you." I felt a lump in my throat. "No, Emma, you've been my anchor too. Watching you grow, fight, and heal, it's been the honor of my life." As we descended the mountain later that afternoon, I noticed something I hadn't realized before. Emma walked differently now. Her steps weren't hesitant. They were deliberate, full of purpose. Her head was held high, eyes forward, not backward. She carried the weight of her past with grace, not as a burden, but as a testament to her resilience. Back at the cabin that evening, she sat down to write. I watched her pen move fluidly across the pages, her focus intense, her expression serene. The sunlight from the window fell across her face, highlighting the calm strength she now carried. For the first time, I could see the woman she was always meant to become. Later, we cooked dinner together, laughing over small mishaps in the kitchen. For the first time, life felt ordinary yet precious. We talked about her plans, the book she was finalizing, the women she was helping, and even tentative dreams about love. Each conversation was a thread weaving her life back into wholeness. That night, as I tucked her into bed in the cabin's small bedroom, she looked at me with eyes clear and bright. "Mom," she whispered, "thank you for everything, for staying, for fighting, for believing in me even when I couldn't believe in myself." I hugged her tightly, holding her as if I could shield her from all future pain. "I'll always be here," I whispered, "always. You don't have to fight alone ever again." She smiled softly, letting go, her face serene. I left the room quietly, leaving the door ajar, and sat outside on the porch. The stars stretched endlessly above, and I realized that while the past would always be a part of us, it no longer defined us. We had survived, healed, and reclaimed our lives. In the days that followed, Emma returned to her routines, the shelter, her writing, her work with young women, but with a renewed sense of purpose. She had learned that fear could be faced, that pain could be transformed, and that no betrayal, no matter how deep, could diminish the core of who she. I watched her thrive, and I finally understood something fundamental. Love isn't just protection, it's empowerment. By holding her close, believing in her, and standing beside her through the worst, I had helped her find her own strength. And in helping her, I had discovered a strength within myself I didn't know existed. One evening, as we prepared to leave the mountains, Emma handed me a small package. Inside was a locket with our initials intertwined, a symbol of our bond, unbreakable and enduring. "For remembrance," she said softly, "of what we survived and what we've built." I clasped it around my neck, feeling the weight not as a burden, but as a reminder of resilience, love, and victory over fear. Emma had taken back her life, her voice, and her freedom. And in doing so, she had given me a gift, the knowledge that love, even when tested by betrayal, could heal, transform, and endure. As we drove home, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the road. Emma sat beside me, quiet but radiant. She no longer carried the fear that had once shadowed every step. She had faced the darkness, confronted the man who had tried to control her, and emerged unbroken. I realized then that while our journey had been harrowing, it had forged a bond between us that could never be broken. We had walked through fire together, and what remained was stronger than any shadow of the past. In the end, we had not only survived, we had reclaimed life. And as I glanced at Emma, smiling softly, filled with hope and courage, I knew one undeniable truth. In the end, I lost the innocence of my daughter, but I found her strength, and it was extraordinary. Love doesn't die in betrayal, it transforms, and so did we. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.